Hello and welcome to a new part of this tutorial series. This is going to be the last part where we are going to set up a singleton in Dart and learn to work with it. And I'm going to also explain what a singleton is. And we are going to finish up this game with creating a new button, which will have 3 settings and it will just make the game play a little bit faster each and individual setting. So stay tuned and let's start talking and start coding. Right here in our game.dart file we have lots of global variables. And if you have gone to any programming school or bootcamp, you probably have heard the phrase global variables are not a good thing to use. Because if I would have a project with multiple people working on it, and every one of us would use global variables to save some kind of state or setting, then there would be a high chance of us having the same name of a global variable, because width, for example, would be a variable lots of people would have, or the height right here. And then the variable would change. And then you could have some kind of weird behavior, because if you set it up and then someone else changes it, you don't know their code and you think that you have a bug in your code. This is one scenario where you can use a singleton as some kind of settings container. So which means that all of these variables are going to be in some kind of container or some kind of box. And this container or box is just going to have one single instance. That's why it's called a singleton. Now if I look at the UML diagram of a singleton, it's basically just an instance of an object which has a pointer to itself, which might sound weird, but it's quite logical why we have this. Just imagine we are having a game class and a settings class, just as we do in our game, and then the menu class can basically just ask the singleton because there is just one instance of it. So we know that this singleton is going to have the right and up-to-date values. Then the singleton can answer by returning the values. And the same thing is for the game. We can ask the same singleton for the height and it's going to return the same value to the game class if this class asks for some kind of value or help or anything. You can use singletons a lot. If you're familiar with Unity or some kind of game designing, you will surely have heard of singletons before. But if you're new, that's some kind of easy explanation. Lots of times the singleton is just used as some kind of settings container so that you do not have to actually put out global variables in your files, because they are not good and you should never actually use them. Let's get back to our game and let's right click and make a new file in the root folder, and let's call this the settings.dart. And in the settings.dart we just want to create a class that is called settings. It is not going to extend from anything, and let's set up the Dart way of a singleton. So we want to have a static final so that we cannot change this variable, and this is going to return a static settings object, and let's call this the instance. And this is just going to return a settings object of the dot internal and instance call right here, which we have not created yet, but we will. Then if you want to use a singleton in Dart, you want to create a factory with the same class name, so settings again, and you want to return the instance, so return and then the instance. And the underscore in front of the variable just means that it's private to this file, which is quite alright because we do not want to actually be able to manipulate the instance. We just want to return it as a settings object. Then we want to create the settings underscore internal, and this is going to be a function with no return value. And I messed up. The static final settings instance is not going to be equal to the settings.instance, but to the settings.internal or underscore internal. And this is the setup of a standard singleton in Dart. Awesome. But now we have no properties, no values, no functions, no nothing in here. So let's declare a couple of them. And to do that, we just go to game.dart and let's copy all of this and let's cut it out just like this, Control X, and go to the settings.dart file and paste it in here. And we want to play around with it a little bit. First off, let's get rid of the constant keywords. Second, we want to reintroduce the normal naming, so board width, board height. The double, let's call this the pixel width. And for the double height, let's call this the pixel height because it's the height in pixels, so pixel height. And for the point size, let's make this the point size in camel case. And the int game speed, let's call this the game speed with normal letters. And for the timer, let's hover over it with our cursor and then hit Control or curl and the spacebar, and then we're going to see some kind of menu, and we want to use the timer. So if I go down on the timer and then hit enter, Visual Studio is automatically going to import the library that we need. So you have to import dart.async if you are not using Visual Studio Code, but if you are, I would highly recommend you get used to the shortcuts. Just for a better way of setting this up, we want to set the values of the variables up in the internal function. So let's just copy these names and the variables with the assigning part of it. So like that, bam, bam, and the last one. And now we also want to just delete these so they look like normal class variables without any assigning in there. Let's put the doubles together. Let's put the integers together. So we have some kind of style and the timer on its own. And awesome. This is our basic setup for our class. But now we get a lot of errors if I look right here. So let's open up the main.dart and look at what we got over here. And right here, the timer is not known. So right here in the build function at the top, let's make a new variable. And let's call this the settings and make that equal to a settings object, just like this. No new keyword, nothing needed. But we don't know this method. So highlight the settings string, the green one, and then hit the control or curl spacebar and just hit enter. And as you can see, we imported settings.dart, which is quite awesome. And now we can actually use these settings. So settings.timer.cancel like this, and we have no global variables anymore. So this way we just get a reference to our singleton that we have created. Awesome. But we have to go to the helper as well, and in here, instead of importing the game.dart, we want to import the settings.dart because we do not need the global variables anymore. And right here at the get random block, we can create again a variable. Let's call it settings and make that equal to the settings object. And again, then we can copy the settings and settings.board width right here. And let's copy the settings.board width and paste it down here, and everywhere we want it to be right there. Awesome. And if I go down here, I have a couple of more errors. So again, variable settings, and it's just the repetitive thing we have to do. So in here we want the point size, so settings.point size, and down here the same settings.point size. Awesome. And we are error free in the help.dart. So let's go to the game.dart. Here's going to be a lot of stuff, I would say. And right here at the top of the underscore game class, let's just create a variable and let's call it settings and make it equal to the settings class again. But we still have to import the settings class. So import the settings.dart so that we can actually use it. So let's scroll down here, and instead of the timer, let's put a settings in front of it, .timer. And then we want to use the settings.gamespeed instead of the global variable that we had earlier. Let's scroll down here and find our next error. And right here in the remove full rows function, we want to access the settings.board height. And right here, instead of the board width, we want to access the settings.board width. And be sure that you use the correct variable according to the global variable that was earlier there, or you will have some annoying debugging. And right here, instead of the point size, we want to use settings.point size. And let's copy this whole thing and paste it down here and here and here. And instead of the width and height, now be careful in the build function right at the top, we want to use the settings.pixel width for the width, and then the settings.pixel height for the height of the container. And it should be height, not width, just as I said earlier. I don't want to shoot myself in the leg. And let's go to the block.dart file in the blocks folder. Instead of attaining the settings reference in the bool function right here, we can just attain it in the class function. And let's make that equal to a new settings object. But we still have to import the settings.dart. And since it is in the folder before, let's import settings.dart like this. Awesome. Now we can use the settings object. So let's copy the settings name. And instead of the board width right here in the can remove function, we want to check with the settings.board width and the board width again, settings.board width. And down here in the is at the bottom, we want to check it with the settings.board height. Also, now we are error free. So let's just try to restart the game. And if nothing has changed, we are good to go. So the player menu is quite alright. And if I hit the play button, nothing should hopefully be changing. And as we can see, nothing has hopefully changed. Everything is working quite alright. The block is falling down as it should be. And we are having hopefully no problems, and it should stop at the bottom. So now we have a singleton and no global variables. Awesome. Let's go back to the game.dart file and let's also cut out these two enums. And since we have a settings.dart file, let's just paste these two enums down here and use them in here instead. And we will get two new errors right here. So let's go to the action button.dart file. And instead of the game.dart file, we want to be importing the settings.dart file. And in the user input, the same error is going to occur. So we want to import the settings.dart file. Let's now close up every single file but the settings.dart file. We are not going to need those anymore. And let's make a new function. And this is going to be quite interesting. Right now we have a static playing size field in pixels. So the width is 200 and the height is 400. But let's now make a function that is going to dynamically figure out these sizes for us. So let's create a new function, and this is going to be a void, and it's going to be called, let's say, something like setup and playing field. It is going to take in two doubles, so we need a double, and we want the screen width And we also want the screen height, just like this. Awesome. And let's now figure out how we are going to do this. Let's make a double and let's call this the user input field padding or something like that. And let's set that equal to just say something like 250 pixels. This is just going to be some kind of padding for our user input field. So the 4 buttons and the, the scoreboard that we have on the board. So the bottom section of the column layout that we have in the playing field. Because right now we are going to calculate some kind of double. Let's call this the new height. And this is going to be equal to the screen height that we get passed in. So this is just the height in pixels that our phone or the phone that this game is going to be played on has available. And we are going to subtract the user input field padding from it. So this is just going to be our new height of this playing field so that we can actually have the playing field as big as possible. And we have to subtract some kind of number from it so we get the size of the playing field and don't get some kind of null references or something like that because the buttons are not able to be put on the screen. Let's also make another double. Let's call this the new width. And this is just going to be equal to the new height divided by 2. And it has to be 1 to 2 because the board width by board height is going to be 20 by 10 and points, so point size. That means that our point size has to be changed as well. Now we can override the variables because we have figured out new values. So the pixel height is going to be equal to the new height and the pixel width is going to be equal to the new width. And now we also have to change the point size because now it's 20 pixels and we would not have a nice playing field like this because it would be all messed up with all the tiles. And if you look carefully, I did not just pick random numbers for these 5 variables, I picked them quite precisely because now if I divide the pixel width divided by the board width, it's going to be 20, and as well the pixel height divided by the board height is going to be 20 as well. So now the new point size that we have, so let's override this variable, is going to be equal to the pixel height divided by the board height. Let's now add a new debug print, something like calculated new height, and then the dollar and pixel height that we just set up in this function. And then the new width is going to be the pixel width, and the new point size is going to be the point size. And let's copy this function name and let's go over to the menu.dart. This is the first screen that we have with the first build context that we are actually calling. And right here in the menu state class, right here, just above the on player click, let's make a new variable. Let's call it settings again. And let's set it equal to the settings class. And let's also import the settings.dart so we can actually do that. And let's now also scroll down to the build function and just above the return right here, make sure you are in the same place as I am. And right here, we're going to get the double, the screen width, and set it equal to a media query dot of the context that we get passed in, and then we want the dot size and dot width. This is just going to get us the screen width in pixels of the current phone, and then the same thing is going to be made for the screen height. So double screen height is going to be equal to a media query dot of and of the context dot size and dot height. And after that is done, we can just go to the settings and then call our function. So settings dot, and then we have the function set up playing field into which we want to pass in the screen width and screen height. And let's just add a semicolon up here, and that's quite good. Now we should have a dynamic playing field. So now if I restart the app, so Shift R, right after I restart the app, I get a debug print that we calculated the new height of 433 pixels and new width of the playing field of 216 pixels. The point size is going to be 21.6 pixels. The playing field is a little bit bigger than it was before, which is awesome. And we have still one little thing that if we go back to the menu, we are going to get another debug print because this build function is going to be called again. So let's hop into the settings.dart and let's just make a private bool right here at the bottom, a bool, so has been set up, and in the internal function let's set that equal to false. The first time we set up the playing field, so the has been set up, let's set that equal to true, and again it has an underscore because it's a private variable, which means that we cannot access it from another class. And in here, if the has been set up is going to be equal to true, then we want to return out of this function so that we do not have to calculate this over and over again right here. Awesome. The last thing left to do right now is add some kind of game speed button. And let's first off make the backend for the game speed button. So hop over to the settings.dart file, go up here and let's create a new enum and let's call this the game speed. Let's make variables like speed 1x and speed underscore 2x, and then speed underscore 3x. You can make however many speeds you want. I'm going to be happy with 3 speeds in my game. Let's make a new function, a void change game speed. And this function is going to take in a game speed, and let's call this the new speed, like this. Awesome. And now let's make a couple of if and else statements. You could use a switch, but I really don't feel like using a switch for 3 variables. So if the new speed is going to be equal to the game speed dot, let's say something speed 1.x, then the game speed variable in the settings.dart file is going to be equal to something like 400 that we have right now. Let's now copy this if statement, put a else down here, and then paste the if statement. So else, if the game speed is going to be equal to the speed.2x, then we want to make it faster, which means that the update is going to be every, let's say, 300 milliseconds, so a smaller number right here. And if the new speed is going to be equal to 3x, then we want to put it to something like 200. You can play around with it. I really don't know what these variables are going to look like on a real phone, so be sure to play around with these variables. You might even add a couple of more or just have 2 speeds, depends on your preferences, but this is going to be good for me. Now we have a function to change the game speed, and this is going to take care of everything in the backend. We don't have any global variables, but this variable right here is going to be changed. Let's hop back over to the menu.dart file, and let's create a function, and let's call this function. Let's make some kind of void and change game speed. And because we set the menu up as a stateful widget, we are also going to take advantage of this. So the game speed at the beginning, let's call this the current speed, so that at the start the game speed variable is going to be equal to the game speed.1x. And let's now make a function for changing the game speed. So we are going to have 1x, 2x, 3x, and then we are going to cycle back to the 1x. So let's make that happen just by using a couple of if and else statements, and we can go to the settings.dart file, and we can actually copy this in the if and else block. And now we can go to the menu.dart, just paste it down here, and let's grab the current speed variable, copy that, and we want to compare the current speed right here instead of the new speed, and right here as well. Let's delete these lines, we don't really need them. We have to call the setState function on it, so the setState. So if the current game speed is going to be the speed.1x, then we want the current game speed to be equal to the speed.2x. So just remove a equal sign here and put a semicolon at the end. And the same thing occurs, so let's copy the setState function and paste it down here, and also paste it down here. So now if the current speed is going to be equal to the 2x, we want to change it to the 3x, and if the current game speed is going to be equal to the 3x, then we want to loop back to the 1x right here. And let's now create our button. So right here where we have the menu button, let's add a comma there, and let's create a new button theme. Put a comma behind it, hit enter, and let's set up the property. So the height is going to be slightly smaller than the play button, which has the height of 60. So let's put the height at something like 40. The minimum width is going to be something, let's say like 160. Again, a little bit smaller than the play button. And the child is going to be a raised button, so raised button. And it is going to have a onPressed event, and this is just going to be a simple function like this. We can use the shortened version, and it is going to call the change game speed function that we created a little bit earlier. Let's now hop over to the color. Let's make this some kind of colors.white, and let's put some kind of text in it. So the child is going to have a text game object, which is just going to tell us the speed. So game speed and 2 dots, and let's make something like x. And now we want to add the actual game speed right here, but we don't have any way of telling the current game speed. So let's go up here, and under the change game speed function, let's make a function which will return a string, and this is going to be called get current game speed. It is not going to take in any parameters. And let's copy this if and else block again, paste it down here. We can delete the setState functions like this. And in here, if the current game speed is going to be equal to the 1x, we want to return a string, and this is just going to be the string with a number 1 in it. And if the speed is 2x, then we want to return a string with the 2, and the same thing for the 3. So let's return a string with the number 3 in it. Awesome. Let's now copy the function name, and right here where we have the button theme and the raised button, we want to add a plus and then the get current game speed and parentheses. If I restart the game right now, we still have the debug print that calculates the sizes and boundaries of our playing field, and we also have a game speed button, and if I click on the game speed button, it displays x2, x3, and if I click on it again, it's going to display x1 backwards. This was the last episode of this tutorial series where we just made a full and functioning Tetris game for multiple devices with a dynamic playing field. I surely hope you enjoyed this tutorial series, and if you did, just please support me, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends if you could. I would greatly appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!